Hey, welcome back. We're still working on fisheries, and I want to zoom back a little bit and think about why are fisheries important? What are some reasons why we should be taking some time to study this? Okay, so when it comes to fish, we're looking at a resource that is found on 70% of the Earth's surface. That's the amount of surface area that the oceans take up. So, fish play a big part in environmental science. Also, 33% of the primary production on the planet is coming from the ocean. So again, this is very relevant to environmental science. Now, you might look at this and it looks like fish is not important. Only 1% of the calories in the human diet come from fish. So, how could this be important for humanity? However, we get 15% of our protein from fish. So when it comes to nutrition, fish is still very important. Okay, now it's interesting when we look at fisheries and ocean resources. For a long time, people thought, there was no limit to this resource. Okay, so I remember when I was younger, you'd hear a lot, we're going to feed millions and billions of people using the oceans. And if you look at the description of a book that came out in 1961, it was called The Inexhaustible Sea. All right? And an exciting book on the sea and its endless resources. Now, here we are in the 21st century, and we now know that this is not the case. We can deplete the oceans. We can overuse the oceans, and we're going to see perfect examples of this. All right, so why is that? Why is that? Now let's look at this slide for a second. We've got a boat, and you've got the ocean here. And what I want to point out is, what is the color of the ocean? And it's blue. And what does that mean? Blue ocean means basically there's not a lot of production going on. There's not a lot of photosynthesis going on. If you had to compare the ocean with a terrestrial ecosystem, it would be a desert, a wet desert. There's not a lot of production going on, but there are in certain places. Okay, you see this dolphin fish here, and it's surrounded by pretty much nothing. Again, the level of production very low in most parts of the ocean, but there are areas that have high productivity, and that's where we find ocean fisheries. One place that you see a lot of productivity is on the continental shelf of continents. And what we have here is a slide that shows Florida, and then around this area is a lot of productivity. It's measuring photosynthesis. Now, why is that? Let's think about what plants need, because this is the base of the food chain. We're talking about phytoplankton. And plants need light. So where is light on the ocean? It's near the surface. Now, the other thing that plants need, like phytoplankton, is nutrients. Now, where are the nutrients in the ocean? Now, that's kind of the paradox, because they're on the bottom. So we have this problem because there's light on the top, nutrients on the bottom, and we need them together to get productivity. So if we go back to the slide, the continental shelf is an area where the ocean is shallow. So you get the light and the nutrients very close together. So this is important because this is where you often find fish. And another place that's important is estuaries, because again, you have nutrients running off from rivers into the ocean, and these guys are feeding, in this case, lobster. And if we look at this graph a little bit, you see two curves here, one that is lobsters and the other one that is runoff. And they seem to match pretty good. But if you look in your book, in the paper, these things don't line up in years. And what's going on here? It takes a while for the lobsters to grow up. But the runoff helps supply nutrients to the young. And that's why we see this really great match here. Okay, so estuaries, very important because they provide nutrients. Another system that has a lot of productivity, believe it or not, is our cold water system. So if we look at this map here, we've got North America here, Europe here. This is a cold water area. And this shows photosynthesis. And again, very strong in the cold water areas. Now, why is that? It has to do with the same idea of nutrients. Because in cold water systems, the difference between the top temperature and the bottom is pretty similar to the warm water regions. However, the density change is a lot less. Cold water systems, even if there's a 10-degree difference, the density between that water is very small. So the nutrients can mix up to the top and help support photosynthesis. And again, that's where you find fish. All right, so and this is related to upwelling regions. This is another place you can find high productivity. You can find fisheries, areas where ocean waters are pulled up or pushed up to the surface, bringing nutrients. And what does this show? This shows areas of high productivity, and you see right toward the equator where there's no land, no estuaries, there's high productivity. That's because there's an upwelling region right here, and those nutrients are pulled across by those winds we talked about, that Coriolis effect that we talked about earlier in the course. It's pulling nutrients to the surface. And you can see that. You can see that really nicely here in areas when you look at surface temperature versus chlorophyll. And when there's areas of very warm water showing no upwelling, you don't get much productivity. But if we look on the next slide, now the surface temperature in the middle is cool because water is being pulled from the ocean bottom, pulled across the equator by those winds, bringing nutrients, and wow, there we got it. Photosynthesis and fish following that productivity. And in times where this slows down because of El Nino, the fish disappear. We're talking 99% in some cases. Okay, so look at this map here. It shows phytoplankton production, the base of the food chain. We see it all put together. Upwelling regions, cold water regions, continental shelf. What eats the phytoplankton? The zooplankton. We see them in high abundance in the same places. And what eats the zooplankton? It's the fish. And this really maps out the fish productivity, where we're seeing ocean fisheries, and it's all down to food chain. Okay, so we're going to stop there, and now that we kind of understand what a fishery is, how it functions, and we're going to see what has happened to fisheries over time in the next segment. So see you next time.